So everybody on the webinar, I just want to let you know we have a live audience here. We're at the Career Development Office. So my name is Rachel Jimenez. I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement. We have a group of, I'm assuming, mostly students here in the Career Development Office. So today, Lucia, say your last name for me. De Leonardis will be presenting. I'll tell you a little bit more about her in just a minute. But for now, we'll go through some of the alumni stuff. So please, in the chat box, let me know if you can hear me. And chat yes if you can hear me, and no if you cannot. They won't be able to hear that, but they can see that on the screen. Everyone is muted. And if you have any questions for the people online, please post them in the chat box. So I'll be monitoring those. What's new at CGU? So I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement. We have an Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement who is Shaheen Fournier for anybody at the Drucker School. Is anyone in the room from the Drucker School? Okay, awesome, a couple. Have you met Shaheen yet? Shaheen Fournier? You have, okay. Make sure you meet her. She's your connection to all alumni. And for everyone else, I'm your connection. So if you're looking for jobs, which you should be doing at the very beginning, and you want to meet with people, do informational interviews, I'm more than happy to help you. So let me know the titles of jobs you're interested in, the companies you're interested in going to, and I'll try to connect you with those people. Website is cgu.edu/alumni, so you can check out all the benefits and resources that you get access to. Students, you can look at that as well. Use your benefits, review your benefits, and make sure you use them. And then we are having a webinar on how to deal with student loan debt that's coming up on September 27th. And after this webinar, I will send the link for everybody that's online. I will send the link so you can register to that, and I will send that to everybody in this class as well. Career Development Office, everyone here knows what that is, but for everyone on the webinar, there is, here's the link for the Career Development Office. There's plenty of resources. Christine Kelly is amazing. She's been building out her team. And then there's also a job portal that you can go on. So if you don't already have an account, Christine can help you set that up, or if you need help, please email me. I will help you do that as well. We're always looking for alumni volunteers. Please let me know if you're interested in sharing a webinar, planning a regional alumni event. People here in the room, you're welcome to come to our alumni events, most of them. So that's another reason to go on the cgu.edu/alumni website, scroll to the bottom, and you can see all the events. But that's a great place to network with alumni. And keep an eye out for your inbox for that as well. And then we also have a new alumni directory, and students are welcome to join this with a catch that you have to work with the Career Development Office first before we will give you access to that. But once you get their blessing, you're welcome to join. And so that is where our alumni directory is. And the great thing is it's similar to LinkedIn, but it's a private community. And people also opt in and let you know if they're interested in mentoring and in what capacity. So they'll let you know if they're willing to be a full-on mentor, or if they're just willing to do resume reviews and things like that, but it's a great resource for students and alumni alike. Again, here's my contact information for anybody that's willing to reach out to me, and without further ado, I'm going to switch the slides over and introduce you to Lucia. Okay, so Lucia De Leonardis, did I say it right? Okay. Is a strategy consultant and healthcare industry professional with expertise in financial growth, new market opportunities, operational improvement, and customer experience design. In 2009, she began her independent consulting practice and has since worked with Fortune 500 companies and other leading organizations looking to transform healthcare, navigate changes in the industry, or improve their organization. Prior to consulting, she worked at WellPoint, now Anthem, and participated in strategy design and implementation of major company initiatives, including a number of mergers and acquisitions. She received her BS in economics from Loyola Marymount University and her MA in economics from Claremont Graduate University in 2001. So thank you, Lucia.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm honored to be here today. I'm happy to be able to speak with current CGU students and I don't know if there's alumni online and share my experience on what I did to become an independent consultant. And I'm going to first kind of walk you through my process, what I went through, what decisions I made and why I made them, and then I'll talk a little bit about what it's like to be an independent consultant. Okay.
So
as Rachel said, I just wanted to mention a couple of dates so you understand sort of how everything happened for me. Okay. The first thing is I did get my MA in economics in 2001, but the time that I was actually at WellPoint, and before then I was at Prudential Financial, who had a healthcare division at the time, was from 1996 to 2009. So one of the important things I want to note here is time overlap. That I actually was working full-time while I went to CGU. So I had, by the time I graduated, I had about 5 years experience in the healthcare industry. And I also want you to notice that I was there for another 8 years before I became an independent consultant. What am I doing?
I can do this.
Okay.
Easier.
Okay. When I graduated in 2001, I wanted to be a consultant. My goal was to be a consultant. But I decided to build a corporate career instead. And the reason I did that was because of the type of consultant that I wanted to be, and that was an independent consultant. And when I started to look at the different kinds of consultancies that were out there, the experience that I had working with them on the client side when I was at WellPoint, I realized what I was missing and what I needed to do to actually take that step. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the different kinds of consultancies that are out there. There's the large premier firms that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, the Deloitte, the McKinsey, WC, Accenture, et cetera. What they do is they bring in really big teams into an organization. And the last one are independent consultants, which as definition are kind of all over the board, because you really define your own focus based on your own expertise, and you have to sell and market that based on what you've done. So I wanted to go through the pros and cons for me. Not for everybody. Everyone's going to have different things. Things that might be a con for me was probably going to sound wonderful to somebody else. But this is how I saw it versus in terms of what I liked and what I wanted and what was out there. So I'm going to first talk a little bit about the premier firms, the Deloitte, the McKinsey, et cetera. And I'm telling you this from having worked with them on the client side, meaning I worked with them on teams, saw the way they worked, I saw the way management reacted to the work, I saw what happened when they left as well. So that's what I want to talk about, is sort of my perception of it. The first thing is the opportunities. They're huge. You can come in entry level, you're going to grow, you're going to get to partner. There's a lot of levels you can take. There's a lot of opportunity there. But sort of the con side of that, you're going to spend a lot of time doing really detailed work. You spend a lot of time sort of doing that kind of work. You're putting together the charts, putting together the grids, you're editing decks all the time, and you're not involved in the strategy. You're not involved in the design. And quite frankly, other than asking clients for questions or things like that, you're not really directing any of the work. And that makes it just very hierarchical, which for me was a con. Another pro is that they're experts. They're seen as experts. And they're definitely respected across the industry, across the business world as being experts. So absolutely, that was a wonderful thing to be able to be part of an organization where you walk in and someone's already thinking, okay, she knows what she's doing. So that was definitely a great thing. And they're also involved, in terms of a pro, in large strategic projects. They always got the coolest work. They always got like the big projects, the big changes in the organization, the big kinds of movements that were happening. So that was always really exciting what they got involved in. The con to that is a lot of times they stayed at what we call the 10,000-foot level. Just really high level, didn't feel like it applied to the particular company very much. A lot of times the internal discussion was, okay, where do we go from here? And what happens is once the consultants leave, the work gets altered. And sometimes it gets altered in not such a great way. Because as the company is trying to take this great information and make it apply to them within their organization and their strengths and weaknesses and their budgets and their time frames and all the other things that now change in the industry or change in the market for them, it starts to get chipped away and it loses what the intention was a lot of the time. So the work gets altered to a way that if consultants came back and saw, they would be sad in terms of what happens to it. So that's the premier firms, as I thought it was. The next one is the niche group. They're much less hierarchical, and they definitely have the different levels. So you can come in, grow, learn, get to different levels, get involved in different pieces. So that was always a great piece. They're also seen as experts, also wonderful. And they're initiative focused. So they didn't get the cool, exciting, momentous kinds of projects that the premier firms got, but they got like really important initiatives in HR and IT, et cetera, things that actually made a big difference in that group. The cons to that I saw was that limited scope, because you're kind of at that point where they somewhat sell a product. I'm here for your HR team. I'm going to work with your HR team. They don't work with sales. They don't really work with marketing. They don't work with other parts of the organization. They're really contained in that area. And for me, that kind of limited the scope in terms of the ability to affect other parts of the organization. And then the other con was that it's a little tactical. Because they're focused on an initiative in a particular group, they have a lot of tactics, a lot of things that definitely make a difference in the organization, but they're not at the strategic level, which for me was much more exciting. And then the final one is independent. And when I worked with independent consultants on the client side, I saw that they had ownership. They were involved in strategy, they were involved in design, they were involved in all the details. They had every piece of it themselves. And it was also somebody who was personally recommended and tailored to them. So by the time we hired an independent, they knew somebody who had used them, that had given them wonderful work, that was specific to them, specific to the organization, and didn't have to be altered in any way. And then the projects do vary. That was another pro for me. In terms of the cons, which that was my perception then, still my perception now, is limited resources. There is very little you can delegate to people. I mean, I have subcontractors, I have folks I farm things out to, but client gives you something at 6 p.m. at night, and you have a presentation the next day at 8, it's all on you. You know, there's not very much that you can sort of farm out all the time. Getting projects, that's a hard piece. It's a full-time job. You're consulting, you're doing all the strategy work, but you're also trying to get projects all the time, constantly, every single day. Never goes away. You know, you don't really have a sales team, right? You don't want to spend all your financial resources paying someone to do sales, right? And then the last one is you're not a contractor. There are a lot of independents that are sort of like they fill a role. You know, the VP of marketing left, and we haven't hired someone yet, so we want you to come in and do something. And so you become like so people think you're a contractor versus a consultant. So keeping that distinction between consultant and contractor is very different. I personally never take a interim role anywhere because I don't want to get sucked in to being part of the organization. I'm a consultant, and I want to stick with project-based work. Okay. So that's sort of the, you know, the different levels. Why I didn't go straight to consulting after CGU? Why did I continue on for 8 years? So I realized that I had the knowledge, but I didn't quite have the credibility. I didn't quite have the experience to be an expert. And you kind of need to be an expert if you're going to be a consultant. You couldn't just know it. You have to have done it. And after 5 years, I didn't do it that much, right? I just knew it. And if you're going to walk in and tell someone how to do something, they want to know that you've done it before. So I realized that I really needed to do a lot more before I can become an independent consultant. So the first thing I did was volunteer for projects to expand experience. So I volunteered for everything under the sun. I really just became the person who was going to be on your project. It was a lot of work, but I learned a lot. And that was my next goal, was to learn about everything. It didn't matter what part of the organization I was in. I was going to learn how legal works. I was going to learn how finance works. I was going to learn how HR works, because I wanted to make sure that I understood all the pieces. If you're doing strategy, it impacts everything. So if I'm sitting there in a little tunnel I'm never going to have the credibility of saying, hey, this is going to impact in this way or that way. And that allowed me to see it and do it. The next one was to continue applying economics to create uniqueness. So I had the unique opportunity and challenge of working full-time while I went to CGU. So while I was studying, I would apply theories to work I was doing. I was in a project, I'm like, oh my gosh, we just studied something like that. Let me put this new flavor to it for folks. And then vice versa. I'm sitting in economics course and writing a paper. I'm like, oh God, I saw this like last week at that one project, and I could put in sort of the reality of what happens with those particular relationships that we were studying. So I wanted to continue to do that because that was what created uniqueness in me. And if I was going to be independent, you are unique, so you have to create a certain flavor. So I continued to do that just to make sure I could hone in on it, because it requires you to explain things in layman terms. You know, you can't just talk theory, you can't talk about what you read in the book. It's about trying to apply it in such a way that someone understands. The next one is I became the internal consultant for new projects. So basically, after doing all of that, I was the go-to person. I was the person they're like, oh gosh, we have to do this thing, we have no idea who to give it to. Go figure out how we're going to set this up. So at that point, I became an independent consultant, but internal, because I became the person they went to. And then the last one, which I don't think is probably the most important piece, was to understand your professional strengths and weaknesses. We all have strengths and weaknesses. And I really needed to understand what was perceived as my strengths and what was perceived as my weaknesses. Because once I was out on my own, those weaknesses could really hurt me because I no longer have a salary. And I need to be able to understand it. So you need everything, not only the content, but you need to know how to network and be a networker. You need to have executive presence. You need to have communication skills, both written and oral, verbal, and you need to have the knowledge. And one of my biggest weaknesses was networking, which was a horrible one to be a weakness when you're internal, let alone when you want to be an independent consultant. So this time that I spent, the 8 additional years that I spent in corporate America, and I stayed there because I started there, and it was easier to build on it than switch over to, let's say, a premier firm and go from there, because it would be kind of starting over. But it allowed me to really hone in and be, when I became an independent, I was completely comfortable. I knew how to be a consultant because I'd done it internally, and I knew what I had to focus in on that didn't come natural to me.
So since you mentioned networking was a weakness, but you're your own sales team, what did you do to overcome that weakness? I have that in a couple slides, and we'll definitely do that. Okay. Absolutely. But I did have tactics, and we'll go through those tactics that I did. So how do I find the right time for change? Like, why was it 8 years, not 7 years, not 9 years? Like, where was the magic time? So the first thing was that I felt that the skill level was achieved. I felt that way. The perceptions I got from other colleagues was that way. So I knew that I didn't have to, that I had the credibility, that I didn't have to prove I was the expert because I was seen as the expert. Even with folks that hadn't met me yet, because I was in the bio that Rachel went through, we went through mergers and acquisitions. So a lot of times I walked into a room with people who didn't know me. And, you know, within a few minutes, I was seen as the expert. So I learned how to do that, how to have that presence so that I was seen as the expert. The other piece was my job satisfaction was diminishing. It was clear to me that I was no longer interested in staying there and doing that it was clearly the time for me to leave. And I assessed the risks because when you go independent, there's no salary, there's no health insurance, there's no, there's no stability. So I had to assess my risks both professionally, meaning if I failed, what would that do to me? And like personally, financially, could I afford to do this? So I had to prepare myself for all things, which means that I created a plan and I also created a backup plan. So
what I did personally in this scenario was when I decided to become a consultant, I told myself for 6 months I had to be a consultant and look for another job at the same time. If after 6 months it was clear the consulting thing was working and it was coming along, I could abandon it. If I didn't, then I had to consider getting another job. It worked out. So I stayed a consultant, but that allowed me sort of a little bit of mental comfort to know that I had another plan in motion in case, because by the time I left, I was at director level, and had I not, it would have taken me a very, very long time to actually find a job if I hadn't had the wheels in motion to do so. And then the last one, oh, by the way, it was during the financial crisis, right? You guys all remember. So it would have taken, I mean, it would have been a challenge. So it was a big risk, and that's why I really needed a backup plan. And then the final one is reinvent myself as a strategy consultant. So I've done that internally, and so I was comfortable that I was no longer whatever title I had at the company. I was the strategy consultant. I was seen that way. I was treated that way. So I figured it was the right time. So that was my journey, right? So I want to talk a little bit about building consultancy. So now you sort of know what I went through and why I did what I did. We'll talk a little bit about if you are going independent, what are some of the key things that you need to consider and do in order to do so after you've built your experience, right? You can build your experience like I did, corporate world, or you can build your experience going to a premier firm or to a niche firm. A lot of people start there and then go out on their own. At the end of the day, you have to have the experience so that you don't just know it, you've done it. The first thing is to set up a business. A lot of consultants are self-employed, but if you are self-employed, you actually are going to lose business. Because if you want a Fortune 500 company as your client, it's hard for them to hire a person. They contract with entities, right? The corporate procurement process is a business contract, and it's a little difficult to do with a self-employed individual. People that I know who are consultants who that have not set up the business, they end up having to go in as a temporary employee, which has its own issues and concerns. So it's really important you set up a business. You set up a structure. It could be an S Corp, limited liability company, partnership if you want to do it with somebody, not by yourself. So you need to have that structure. You need to have a business plan. Because we talked about how you create your own scope. You can't be all over the board. You need a business plan. You need to be able to say, this is what I do. This is what my consultancy does. This is what I can offer to you. This is how I'm different from a premier firm or a niche firm. Here's what I offer. So you need that plan. You also need business insurance. Not an exciting thing to talk about, but you do need it. You cannot, again, get a Fortune 500 client without business insurance. They literally will not contract with you without, in my case, 3 different types of insurance. There's nothing they can do. They just can't contract. So it's not exciting, but you need it. And then bank accounts, taxes, payroll, accounting, retirement plan. Again, you're no longer going to be an employee of someone else. You have no retirement plan. And just sort of a little soapbox, you can't just rely on an IRA. You do need to set up an employer-based plan. You're going to actually be able to save at a level like a 401k. And there's different options for small businesses. So the setup of the business is actually kind of important because, again, like I said in the beginning, you risk losing business if you don't set up correctly. So you don't want to do that to yourself. You don't want to get all excited that, AT&T called you, but now they can't really work with you because you don't have everything that they need to be able to do that. The next piece is getting clients and projects. After you've set up your business, that becomes the thing you need to do, and this is where networking comes in. You really start with your current and past contacts with basically everyone you've ever known. You kind of just start there. Let them know what you're doing now. You find out what they're doing, and you really just start to build that. And hopefully, while you were gaining your experience, you did a good job of collecting that. Now there's LinkedIn. It's a lot easier to do. Back in 2009, I don't know if there was LinkedIn back then, but it was new if it was. And then the networking. So let's talk about networking right now. I'm an introvert. Networking is not natural to me at all. I never liked it, never could do it, didn't come to me. It was not my thing, but I had to do it. So, and I knew it had to be a capability. So what I did was, and I started working on this when I was gaining my experience in the corporate world. I didn't wait till I was a consultant to do this, was to reach out and stay current with relevant clients and contacts. So I could be in the middle of a project, I'm exhausted, I'm sitting in a hotel in Boston, and I'm emailing people just to see what's up with them. So it's really important that clients are always aware that you're there. You need to be top of mind because everyone is so busy. You're not top of mind. You need to stay top of mind. You also need to know what's going on with them, and they need to know what's going on with you. So I may have had a client in 2010, but if I don't keep in contact with them, they may forget me because it's been a while. They also only remember the project I was on with them. I've done 15 projects since then in about 15 different areas, a lot of them uncharted territory. They need to know that. They need to know you have that experience so they don't just see you in this little bucket. They actually understand your full capacity, so they think about you for other things. So that's what I do is I'm the person who keeps in touch. The other thing is ask for introduction. You have there'll be a lot of contacts and clients that are very open and friendly and very wonderful to work with, and there's a mutual respect that you have. Those are the people that you ask for introductions. When they're telling you things that are going on in their company, oh, hey, can I get introductions to that group of people? I think I have some information that would be helpful to them. You can share information and give information. It's actually okay to give it up for free a little bit. I do that all the time. Is I will give information out for free. I will give consulting for free, no more than an hour, but I will give it for free because they need to understand what you're made of if they don't know you. And so if you have an introduction, you spend an hour with someone and they tell you what they're going through, and you basically laid out everything, how to do it. If they have no budget, they're not going to hire you. If they have a budget, they'll be like, no, you do it, and I do it. So that happens a lot. So you definitely want to be able to ask for introductions because a lot of times it opens doors for you. The next thing is to set goals to reach out regularly. I actually have a calendar to do number one. I have a set thing, just a reminder in my calendar to do it. Again, I'm not a natural networker. I don't get excited and think at the end of the day, who am I going to call and talk to? It's not my thing. So I need to be able to set a schedule to do so. And then finally, introduce yourself. I mean, there are many times when you are interacting with people or you're at a conference or you're at a client on a project, someone comes into the meeting just to listen in. Introduce yourself, talk to them, find out who they are, what they do, tell them everything that you do. Take the opportunity, they're standing right there in front of you. Not cold calling, they're standing right there in front of you. Take that opportunity to network with them. A lot of times it ends up positive, a lot of times nothing happens, but it's worth it. So let's go into the types of projects. So that was the networking piece, but what does a consultant do? Like, how do I spend my time? And I can't go through the content of it because, like, confidentiality, but I can tell you the different kinds of projects that I have. Some of them are independent work, which means I sit at my desk by myself for 4 weeks and I crank out a strategy or I crank out an assessment or I'm reading, analyzing, putting something together, having meetings with clients over the phone or in person just to get the information that I need. But it's really independent. It's just me and getting what I need to get to a goal. The next one is working with client teams. So a lot of times as a consultant, you're hired to help lead a team of internal folks who are working on something. So they become a core piece of getting your goal done. So you are leading and working with folks, giving out assignments, maybe delegating some of the work because they know their company more better than you do, but you're working directly with the team. So it almost becomes a team environment with a bunch of people you've never met who have no accountability with you, but you have to lead them towards the direction. And then the final one is working with other consultants. I mentioned before that I subcontract a lot. I do subcontract with other consultants. Projects is in a direction that either is not interesting to me or something that would take me longer than someone who lives and breathes that. So I'd rather just bring someone in to do that piece. And the same thing is I've also subcontracted for large projects. I've actually worked with companies that compete with the premier firms who bring in independent consultants, and I'll subcontract with them and work with a team of consultants, and then we'll do a project as if we have worked together before, but we never have. Okay. In terms of what a day kind of looks like, you create proposals and work plans to achieve the client's goal. That's one of the key responsibilities of a strategy consultant. You develop, document, and communicate insights and assessments. This is an important piece because it's not information, it's insight. So this is where the know it versus do it makes a difference, because they're not looking for information. They want to understand how it specifically applies to them and their systems and their workforce and their culture, et cetera. So it really needs to be something that's insightful to them. So you spend a lot of time putting together presentations and things like that, charts, whatever. You outline recommendations. You need to really, once you've put together the insights and assessments, you need to now give them a course of action. What do you need to now do? You also are looking to implement or demonstrate the ability to implement. So this goes back to what I was saying about some of the cons for me on premier firms, as I saw them, of course, was the client likes to feel like they can actually implement it, that they don't have to do a lot of work to then make it happen. So sometimes I'm hired to actually help them implement it, so that's great, but a lot of times I'm not. I'm just there for the strategy and the setup. I will always demonstrate the ability to implement. I will always give them that roadmap to how do you get from what I gave you to where you're going to be at the end of implementation, because you need to make sure that they understand that it's doable. And unless you map it out, a lot of times that isn't clear.
Could you give an example of implementation that you've done?
Sure.
Not done, but like what is?
Yeah. So let's say I'll give you a go then. Okay. So I initially was hired to do I'm in the healthcare area. So I was hired to reorganize and re-strategize how a care management team was put together. So how do you offer care management, which is like health coaching and other kinds of things, to a certain population. So they needed to completely change the way they approached it, the way the organization was set up, et cetera. And then, but that's all I was hired for. So I left, gave them a roadmap of everything that needed to be done in order to do so. Meaning, you need these kinds of projects, you need a team focused on this, you need a team focused on that, you need a team focused on this, you need to be able to have this, that, and the other thing. So they were very clear on the number of initiatives necessary, the types of skills that were necessary to do so, the timeline for each. I wasn't hired to do that, but they know that that was done. 2 months later, they called me to implement because they needed someone to help them lead that all. But what I left them was, okay, now we know what it's going to take to do and that we know we can do it. And it was up to them to decide did they need help or they could do it internally. But they actually knew what was necessary.
So you actually stepped into that organization for 6 months to become like an employee and leading that?
9 months, but no, I did not become an employee. I always stayed the consultant. I never wanted to be employee role. So I'm always the consultant. I'm working with the client team. It's always clear that I'm not in a role. I'm not I'm not part of their organization. but I become a trusted member of the team. And then the lines start to blur because you're seen as a trusted member according to everybody, but it's never confusion that you aren't part of that company. You're always seen as a consultant, but you're a trusted member of the team that does so.
So that question, when you do that for 9 months, is that like your primary gig, or like was that like 40-hour, like a week?
That particular one was a full-time.
So you weren't taking other clients, or?
I did have another client at the time, but that's where you have to manage it, because that one required me to be in person, and that one happened to be in Boston, and I live here. So while I was there, the other one thankfully was in California, and it was more the independent work type, where I only had to go in and meet with them like once every 3 weeks. So at night, I would work on the independent work. During the day, I'd work on that client, and then when I would come home, I'd be home like on a Friday, I would go and meet with the other client. So they really never knew that I was, like, where I was.
Living in Boston.
I was going back and forth. They paid for me to go back and forth. Welcome. And then you want to work with clients, as we talked about, and then lead project management. You have to do that a lot. Even though you're not a project manager, like I know the certificates for it, at the end of the day, when you're working with a client team or you're doing independent work, you have to know how to manage a project. You know, you're not like a certified project manager. You're not doing like Gantt charts and stuff, unless that's your thing and that's your consultancy. But even if you're not, that's not your thing, you still need to be able to do that. The other thing I want to mention is clients' expectations. They're very high. But I want to help you understand what they're expecting and what you're actually delivering as a consultant, besides the content, right? Which at this point should be a no-brainer for you when you have the expertise in the content. The first thing is the clients expect the goal to be met. And in order to do that, you need to, number one, meet the goal. And number two, you have to prove to them you met the goal. Although you know you met the goal, unless you can prove it to them and they can see it, you didn't meet the goal, regardless of whether you did or you didn't. So that's a really important step. And the last piece, you need to walk them through the ability to be implemented. That's how they know their goal has been met. If you met it, they believe you've met it, and they know what to do next. That's what meeting the goal means to them. The other thing is that clients expect you to be the expert. And when you're an expert, again, content aside, you have a solid plan all the time. Circumstances can change. You're the one who knows what to do, like, instantly. You're always a step ahead. You're always a step ahead of them. You always know what's going to come up next. You always know what needs to happen next. You always need to know where the next question is going to be. They expect you to be on top of it and sort of a step ahead of them. You're also innovative, insightful, and knowledgeable. You need to be able to see things they don't see. You need to come up with ideas they never saw. You really need to be intellectually at the next level as well. And then you have to be professional, confident, and personable. So not only do you need to be professionally on top of everything, but you also need to be pleasant too. You can't have personality conflicts. You are always the peacemaker. You are always the mature one. You solve problems. You don't get frustrated. That's something that, again, when you're getting experience, you need to learn how to do. Not something natural for me, but something you need to learn how to do. Some of the challenges. So, you know, I love being an independent consultant, but there are challenges to it. Number one is maintaining a flow of projects. Like I mentioned, it's an everyday job. You're constantly networking, constantly reaching out to people, constantly keeping your eye on what's possible. With some of the clients that are Fortune 500, something hits the news. That's something that gets you to call someone and say, hey, XYZ, I can help you with. All kinds of things. There's different openings and opportunities. It never should feel like a cold call. There has to be a point and a purpose and a connection. Networking is not cold calling. It is about a web of connections. So you always have to have those connections as you're doing it. The other challenge is managing a work-life balance. So I got married the year I was in Boston, and I got married here. So That's hard to set up to, you know, get married, have a wedding while you're sitting in Boston the whole time. So work-life balance is really challenging. You need all kinds of tactics and tools, things that work for you, look crazy to other people that don't matter. They have to work for you because keeping that balance is very important. You're going to get burned out quick if you don't have a balance. So you have your own boundaries. You also want to stay relevant and engaging in continuous learning. And that's a challenge as well because you're on a project, you're doing business development, you have a life, but you have to stay relevant. So if I'm sitting here for a year on care management, my next project, I can guarantee you, because it wasn't, care management, even health IT. So if someone calls you to talk about mobile health, you can't seem like, you're like, wow, my information's from like 2 years ago, the last time I did mobile health. You can't do that. You have to be on top of it all the time. So while you're taking the time to, you know, network, while you're taking the time to do your work, or you're taking the time for your family, you also need to make sure that you're always on top and a step ahead on everything that you said in your business plan is your scope. And then the other piece is managing client dynamics during projects. So the person who hired you, they love you. But their colleagues, they hate consultants. They want to pick at everything that you do. They are so not interested in your presence. And if you're being in a client team, nobody gets along with each other, no one wants to work together. For you, have a goal to meet. You're hired to do this, so what are you going to do now? So you have to become the motivator, you're the peacemaker, you cannot get into negativity, you cannot get into all the little dynamics and the politics. You have to be the one that brings everyone together and motivates them to get to the goal. You have no choice, otherwise you're not successful. So in order for you to be successful, you have to make the team successful, and sometimes that means that you need to be the person that gets everyone to work together. And it's also rewarding. So it's a lot of interesting projects. I mean, I've done lots of great innovations, things that didn't exist in the industry, you know, things that you just hear about getting funding, and now suddenly it's like, okay, we don't know what this means or what we're going to do, so what are we going to do? So lots of great fun innovations, lots of complex problems. You have people who, you know, inherited a mess from a merger, and you're like, oh man, now we got to figure out what to do. So it's a lot of really interesting work. I also get to challenge myself because I have to overcome a lot of my weaknesses, a lot of information that no one has. You know, I've got to use my tools, my base tools as a consultant, as an economist, and challenge myself to say, this is uncharted territory, now what? And then finally, the flexibility, which is wonderful. Although you work a lot and you have to create that balance, the ability to be here today is because of the job that I have. You get the ability to really work a 24-hour day and figure out how you want to manage that. So that's really, really nice. And that's it. Yep.
So for everybody that's on the webinar, if you have any questions, go ahead and type them in the chat box, and I will read them for you. And anybody in the room, if you have any questions, now's your time.
I have a question on the average size of the fund. Because I'm like with market currencies, like studying normally is available for those like big companies, so they only get change like care about strategy. But then the independent, like, you know, normally what we use like design or online. So how does that attach?
So my clients actually range from largest in their industry to a small regional player. And they're interested in strategy in a different way. So if you think about your McKinsey's and the premier firms, right, and that 10,000-foot level thing I talked to you about, that is going to only be the super large firms that would be interested in that. If you're a small firm, you A, can't afford it, and B, you've got to move. You can't spend 3 years figuring out what to do. Your competition is right at your heels. So it's still strategy, but you have to bring it down to their, so it basically becomes like a hybrid of strategy and tactics at the same time. Like they won't be happy with just strategy. When you first go into them, you got strategy and tactics at the same time. Versus in a large company, you first start with the strategy, you talk about it, then you bring in the tactics and you talk about it. You just need to approach it slightly differently because they need to feel like they can do something a lot quicker, and so you got to present that to them a lot quicker.
So it's not from top down, more like bottom up, and really have too much of a strategic model and
So with a large client, a firm, someone who's, top in their industry, you can show them the models and talk to them about the models. The smaller ones, you do the models, but you don't show them. You actually need to just show them the outcome of the model, so the insight of it. It's like, they're like, I believe you, you did the right thing, just show me what to do now. Not all clients are the same sophistication, whether they're big or small, because even big ones are not all the same sophistication. So you really need to, in talking to your clients and understanding the organization, make sure you present the information at a level that makes sense to them. So sometimes that means giving them a real intellectual strategy build out. Sometimes that means you need to interpret that already before you show that to them. You still do the steps in your head. You still do the work, but in terms of what you present and show to them, it's what's different. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Do you have the onboarding process?
No.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, I have a particular onboarding process for my clients in terms of them, vendor setup from them, or?
No, in terms of, like, is there a procedure that you typically go through in order to set up each client that you work with? Bring them on, let them know what exactly you will do, what exactly you want to do, follow that process.
Got it. In terms of the setup process, how we set up scope of a project. So every project will start with a proposal and a statement of work that goes through not only the objective, but also the my work plan, meaning I'm going to do these 7 steps. I'm going to do these 7 things, and this is what these 7 things will do, and here are my deliverables, and we talk about that. So you probably go through about at least 2 iterations of that, so they're very clear on what they're going to get, the way I'm going to get it, what's out of scope, meaning things I'm not going to do, and things that I will be doing. So that's all set up in the beginning. It all has the proposal process, and that becomes part of the contract when you go through the financial piece. Right. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
When you made the transition, it's one thing to develop strategy in an organization that you're pretty familiar with. It's different going into a new organization. So what were the challenges, and how did you handle that?
So,
a version of it.
So the question was, how did I go through what it took to create strategy for one single company that I was very familiar with, to doing so for companies that I was not familiar with and went into as a consultant. So I guess I had, unfortunately, like a unique opportunity with that, because at the time that I was with WellPoint, we went through like 8 mergers or so that did require me to go into different companies who didn't know me and to set myself up. So what I use that time as is, how are the ways I set myself up as the expert? What are the ways that I set myself up as the person who knows? And that goes to that unique flavor I had with economics, that unique flavor I had. So I learned about everything, which included my competitors as well. I volunteered, although did not like. I was in charge of national competitive intelligence. I knew everything about my competitors. I knew everything about them. I knew how they worked, what didn't work, whatever. I used that to my advantage so that I was always the expert internally. And then when I started consulting, again, remember I mentioned the networking, people you know, started with people you know, so they know your talents. You learn their organization, you learn next organization. By the time you're at the 4th client, you don't need to know them anymore because you've kind of built that up. Does that answer your question?
When you're setting your price, do you do hourly rate or and then how do you structure overhead?
Okay. So the question was about how to set your hourly rate and overhead. So your overhead builds into your rate. So there's not a separate like admin fee or anything like that. It comes into your rate. In terms of setting your rate, a couple things. Number one, you want to look at what the industry is charging. So you know other consultants. In my case, I worked with other consultants, so I know what they charged us, and I know, if I could do what they did or couldn't do what they did. I knew what all the different consultancies charged on hourly rates for different positions, so I could use that information. But then I also have to embed your admin into that as well. In terms of how I charge, it varies. Some clients, so I always have an hourly rate that is the building block, but a lot of clients want a fixed cost. They don't want to be like, oh my God, your fee just came in like astronomical this week, or I can't handle this, I don't know what to do. So a lot of times they like the fixed fee. So you have to go through a whole process of budgeting, and this is where the work plan comes in that I mentioned. You have your work plan, you know all your stats. You estimate how long everything's going to take you. You add a little bit of cushion for company dynamics. Some companies have to hash things out all the time. Some companies really streamline. You usually get a sense of this during the proposal process when you talk to people. These are questions you ask to find out how things work at the company, so you know how much cushion you put in, and then you give them a fixed fee. Then you work with that. Sometimes, usually I've been lucky. I've been pretty good at it, but sometimes there's a lot of dynamics that you don't account for that takes a lot of time, so that you start to dwindle in terms of your profit. And a lot of times things work a lot quicker than you expected. Over time you learn that, but you have to estimate what you're going to be doing and all the dynamics in order to do so.
Just a follow-up question that somebody just asked up here is, do you charge 50% up front in relation to pricing? And then do you charge for travel?
So let me do the travel one first because it's quick and easy. So I do not charge for travel if it's a daily driving distance commute kind of thing. I just embed that in my price if I have to go like at a certain frequency more than a couple times a week. So that's built into my price. If the travel is requires overnight stay or everything is at cost, they pay for everything. I don't pay for any of that, none of that. They have not a stipend. They have to pay for my food, they have to pay for my airfare, they pay for my hotel, they pay for my taxi, they pay for everything while I'm in that city and to and from the airport. So that's all, that's not included in my price, and that's all at cost. I give them all receipts, etc. And I keep it reasonable. I keep it very reasonable because no one wants to squabble over which hotel I wanted to stay at. So, and in terms of 50%, no, I don't typically charge 50 up front. A lot of people don't like that. A lot of firms, a lot of like niche firms, and actually market research firms will do that quite a bit because they have like a setup cost they want you to pay. I find that in the consulting world, that seems to bring a little bad blood sometimes. So what I'll do is I'll create milestones in deliverables and charge at each deliverable so that I end up getting a chunk of money at different parts of the project. I'm not waiting till the end, and that I've actually end up getting a pretty good chunk near the beginning and don't have to wait.
Did you have another question?
Yeah, so for example, your Boston opportunity that you had, is that something that you charge for the entire implementation project, how much it be, or did you break it down hourly or weekly? And was your cost cheaper than just having an internal person doing it, or was it more expensive than having an internal person doing it?
So the question was, how was that Boston example, how was that charged, and was I more expensive or less expensive than an internal person? It was definitely more expensive than an internal person by a long shot, but they also don't have anyone with the capability to do so. So I am more expensive than if they used someone internally, but they had no one internally. And if they were going to hire someone internally, it would have taken a long time, and it would have been just as expensive. So it's definitely not cheaper. And in terms of the second part, which was the, oh, how did I charge?
How do you charge?
That one was, again, because I said it varied at different ones. The first phase of it, which was the strategy piece, that was fixed to 40, even though I didn't work 40 hours a week, I worked more. It was fixed to 40 hours a week, and that was a fixed fee. And that way they pay for all my travel and all that other stuff. The second part of it, I think the same way, was the same way. But the first piece, there was a fixed fee, but then here's the total, and the total was going to be. The second piece, because there was implementation, and that requires the internal team to work a lot, I could not tell them how long it was going to take. I could tell them what I was going to do. I could tell them when things were not going on course and why they were not going on course, and, you know, what I was doing to try to fix it and what they needed to do to try to fix it. But that one didn't have like a, this is the end amount. It just, I just could guarantee them what their bills were going to look like, and that we would work together to make sure it would end at an appropriate time.
There's one question on here. Do you have any tips on how to approach or write proposals?
So your proposal should have a couple of sections to it. One should be an explanation of the background of the situation. So you're going to have an initial conversation with a client before you write any proposal, and they're going to tell you what their problem is, what they're trying to achieve, and you need to reiterate your understanding of that on the document, because you want to use that opportunity to confirm that you guys are all on the same page. The other thing is you want to talk about your objective. What is it that you're trying to solve? What is the client's goal? What will make them happy at the end of the day that you've done? So you want to iterate that. Again, you want to make sure everyone's on the same page. You also want to go through your plan of work, which means here are the 15 things I'm going to do. I'm going to interview people internally. I'm going to research industry documents. I'm going to interview competitors. I'm going to put together a preliminary assessment and present it to the team at an early interval so that we can talk about the direction and the strategy and the challenges, et cetera. So you're going to lay out everything you're actually going to do. So again, that they're comfortable with what you're going to do, they understand what you're going to do, they also understand what you're not going to do. You also have a section sometimes with exclusions of not in scope. Sometimes when you're talking to a client, you realize, oh man, this is going to be scope creep, I can smell it from a mile away. So you really need to put in a section about what's not in scope specifically, because you can feel them going that way, and you already told them that you can't go there because it's not appropriate, so you need to sometimes lay that out. You also want to go through time frame, how long it's going to take you. You also want to give a budget, how much you're going to charge them and how you're going to charge them. In that initial conversation, you find out what kind of a structure they want. Do they want fixed? Do they want hourly? Do they want hourly with a cap? I mean, there's a lot of different ways to see where they're comfortable and just do it that, whatever they're comfortable, do it that way. You can figure out a way to make the numbers work, just make it the way that they're comfortable. And then that's it. And then you definitely always want to talk about your proposal with the client after that. But that's just a proposal, but then you do the contracting. After you do the proposal, then you go into contracting. Smaller firms will just use your proposal as a contract and the signatures happen there. Larger companies then take that into procurement, write up like a 14-page, or in some clients, 150-page, I want to fill it up, 150-page contract.
For that?
No, what I did later. But 150, like you go through everything and redline everything, and so it just depends on the client. So you do have to be prepared that that could be your statement of work, and then you also be prepared that that's just a piece that goes into a more legal document.
So I have a follow-up question to that, because it sounds like there's a lot of administrative things that aren't actually filled in the strategy and even just the networking. So based on your hourly rate and then how many hours you're actually working, just networking and writing contracts and scopes of work and things like that, do you think you're more profitable than if you were an employee, less profitable, just because how many hours are you working a week, a month?
So in terms of, compared to what I made, I make more. I definitely make more. I probably work fewer hours.
Oh, you do?
Not in any one week.
Right.
I mean, I could work, exactly, it goes up and one. So if you average it, I probably work less, because when you're an employee of a corporation, you're in a bunch of meetings that have nothing to do with any of your jobs, any of your strategies, anything that you do. You don't have any of that stuff. You don't have 14 hours of training, legal training you need to do every year on this, that, and the other stuff. You don't have any of that. So you work less because all that stuff is cut out. And you also don't have anyone to socialize with, so there's no like so you actually become very efficient as a worker, but there will be times on a project I've been up till 2 a.m. multiple nights working on projects, not because I'm not good at project management, but because the client sends me something at 6 o'clock for an 8 o'clock meeting the next day, and you need to incorporate it. You have no choice. So sometimes you work crazy hours, and then you need to take a break to create that balance. But overall, I wouldn't say that it's less just because of cutting out that stuff.
How do you, and this might be a personal thing, but how do you keep the line to where you're separate from the company but a part of it? Like, what kind of things do you have to do?
The client team?
Yes.
Okay. So the question was, how do I keep myself separate from the client team that I always see my consultant? Good question. So you always make it clear that you're a consultant, you work your own hours, you set your own rules. So by always setting your own rules about how you're going to do things and how you're going to run things, it does differentiate you from the client team. So you're always friendly and pleasant and part of the team. Sometimes they invite you to lunches and sometimes they don't. At the end of the day, you're mature, and so you're not supposed to care, right? And whatever happens, happens, you know, whatever they want to do. But you always kind of create that separation of, you know, you say we sometimes, say you sometimes. You want to seem like you're part of the team that's working on it, but you also want to realize that you're going to go away. So you kind of balance your language and sort of your relationships and the way you do things so that you always have that separation. Go here first, and then we'll go back.
How has it worked out for you in terms of the portion that are local projects and then traveling?
So the question is, what's a portion of my projects that are local versus traveling? So I actually have probably 3 breakouts. I have the local, which I physically have to go to. I have the not local that I might go to once every 3 weeks. So they might be in Chicago, but it's still a remote project. They work perfectly fine virtually on the phone. Some companies do that well, some don't. So I have that version where they're not local, they're in a different time zone, but I'm mostly at home. And then I have the ones where I'm constantly there. I probably, in terms of being, I would say my biggest portion is out of the state of California, yet not having to physically be there every day. That's my biggest portion. I would say that would probably be about 60%. Then it would be about 20% in the state of California, Los Angeles actually, San Francisco I consider further away, that I would have, you know, could go to more often and drive to, and then probably 15% would have to be there every day. And that's just because it's expensive for a client to pay for you to be there every day. So I always try to make it set up that I don't have to be there every day. I'm like, it's really pricey for me to do this. There's certain parts of the project I have to be there, I want to be there, it's best for the team. Why are you going to pay for me to go out there if I'm going to be sitting at my desk for a week? So I try to balance that out for them.
Well, it seems like you were able to really develop your expertise, that, you know, the confidence of being an expert through your previous company before you launched into, you know, industry consulting. What about those of us who don't have that company to launch from but still want to go into consulting? How do we develop that expertise in a specific field?
So they always say that before you become an independent consultant, you should learn on someone else's dime, and that's really what you should do. So it's your choice whether if you really want to consult, it's your choice. Depends on what industry or topic interests you. You can just go work in the corporate world, see something there. You could also move from company to company within that industry so that you do get different flavors of different companies and how they work. and get your experience there. You could go to a premier firm, get your experience there. You could go to a niche firm and get your experience there. But I think what I want to, sort of the message I want to come across is you definitely need to get the experience somewhere. And again, not just know it, but having had done it before you go independent, because no one will want to take the risk if you don't have good examples of what you've done. I, again, had a unique opportunity because the company I was with was going after merger after merger after merger. I did get a chance to go through different flavors of how different companies did it, because I went in and I took the principles that I did was learn everything. So I learned the way all those different companies operated before they got swallowed and became one.
One more question. Have you ever been a part of a project where it kind of didn't work? You were brought in to consult on some deliverables to produce something, and then you realize halfway through, I'm not going to be able to meet this, either because of them or maybe because of me, and you just kind of cut your losses, whatever.
So the question was whether a project just ever didn't work and you try to cut your losses. No, because you have to learn how to position it. So that's never the case. So even if you go in with a certain objective because a client told you something specific, and you get in there and you're like, this wasn't true. This is not what's going on. This is not the reality of this company. There's no way in, the 5 weeks I have to do this that it's even possible. But it's not a failure because you're there for an assessment, you're there for a goal. So again, you have to meet your goal, prove you met your goal, and prove implementation. So you just have to reposition what happened in such a way. So basically, them not being fully understanding of their personal situation when they hired you is actually one of the things in your assessment that you provide to them. So you're still meeting the goal because you've now shown them the reason they weren't successful before to meet the goal is because they didn't actually know what was going on. So you always reposition it as meeting your goal and getting that information as possible, because at the end of the day, they want to do X, Y, Z, and you need to show to them how to do it and why it happened. So it's okay if it, again, goes off course. You just have to get it to where the end is.
Any other questions? None online, it looks like. So thank you so much, Lucia. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
So thank you, everybody online. We will be sending the recording to everybody. You're welcome. They're saying thanks online. I'll send the recording and a survey to you within the next week or so. And then if you have any questions or any follow-up, feel free to send me an email and I'll get back to you.